planting seeds.
On today's show, Laura Heywood interviews
groundbreaking, industry-changing theater maker, Sammi Cannold. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood. Oof, you guys, I'm thrilled about today's guest. She's on the cutting edge of what theater is starting to become, a place where there are no boxes to think inside of, no limitations on the scope of productions, no ideas too bold or too ridiculous to consider. Ever think of putting a musical on a moving bus? She did. She made it into a reality. Ever think of making a show where the action largely takes place underwater while also inside a traditional proscenium space of a major national theater? She did, and she made that play. Ever think of taking a grand, beloved musical about immigration and staging it at a historic landmark on a small island in the middle of a river where the actual story takes place? She did, and she made that happen too. Sammi Cannold, who graduated from college just 4 years ago, has already achieved all of this, disrupting the idea of what theater can be in so many ways. And she's also contributed significantly to many other groundbreaking works, including acting as the associate director of Natasha Pierre in The Great Comet of 1812 and Eve Ensler's In the Body of the World. She's been an artistic fellow at the ART, a member of Cirque du Soleil's Creative Cognoscenti, and a Sundance Institute fellow. And she's also working on the highly anticipated new musical Lempicka by Carson Kreitzer and Matt Gould. And while age is just a number, her achievements are that much more astounding when you consider the fact that at age 25, she's one of Forbes magazine's 30 Under 30, an honor that named her one of the brashest entrepreneurs across the United States and Canada, and a bold risk taker putting a new twist on the old tools of the trade. Please join me in welcoming Sammi Cannold. Hey, girl.
Hi. Wow. I'm so honored by that introduction.
Can you scoot a little closer to the mic?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that introduction is a list of facts. It's not even really any compliments. I guess me saying, like, I'm honored to have you is a compliment, but the rest of that, you did.
Thanks. Well, I'm honored to be here and in your amazing company. So
thanks.
Thank
Okay, so let's start with my first introduction to you, which was Ragtime on Ellis Island. You grew up in New York City. You obviously, like the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, are omnipresent. And you also grew up in the theater industry. Where did you get the idea, and how did you think you could actually make it happen to put Ragtime, this beloved musical, in the middle of an island, in the middle of a river?
It started when I was in college, where I directed a site-specific production of the musical Violet that was on a bus. And that process was rather intoxicating, just in terms of like getting to understand the form of site-specific theater and falling in love with what was possible in that medium. And when I finished directing that piece, I made a list of musicals that I thought could be performed site-specifically, because I was so excited about what that genre was, and it felt like there was a niche for that type of work. And Ragtime paired with Ellis Island was on the top of that list, because when I was just listing my favorite musicals, Ragtime has always been a musical that's a favorite of mine. But then I was like, well, where would it belong? And I was like, well, of course, Ellis Island. And ironically, my brother's bar mitzvah was on Ellis Island.
I didn't even know Ellis Island was a place you could like rent out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a big part of it, because my family had gone there for his bar mitzvah. I had an understanding that it was a rental venue.
That's so funny.
So I wrote to the same person that we rented it from when he had his bar mitzvah, and said, is there a permit process that we can go through to rent the island to do this musical on the island? And I mean, I was a junior in college. They had no reason to take it seriously, but I guess they did.
Wait, did you rent the whole island?
Yeah.
That's incredible. And like, this is what I love about young people making theater, is that when you don't know the rules, you don't play by the rules. And it's not that it's different, I think, than breaking rules. Because if you're like, we're not allowed to do it, but we're going to go and do it anyway,
right.
Or I'm going to fight to change the rules or whatever, it's different than when you just wide-eyed and innocent ask a question and give someone the opportunity to say yes.
I think that was like exactly the lesson that we learned from doing that, because we were just so naive that we didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. So we were just like, hey, could we do this? And they said, sure. And it all sort of snowballed from there, much in the way that you described, because we were like, well, why not ask Brian Stokes Mitchell to narrate it and see what he says, because we don't know any better, so we might as well. And it just we were so lucky that it all fell into place as it did, because initially the idea was that we were going to do a small friends around a piano version of the show, where we were just going to test the material on the island just to see what it felt like to hear that music on the island. And then what ended up happening was I had worked with Laura Michelle Kelly when she was in Finding Neverland.
She is the lead actress in this musical that was based on the life of J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan.
Yes.
Just filling people in.
Thank you.
In case they don't know. In fact, we should probably, I don't want to interrupt this story, but I'm just putting a pin in. I want to come back around and actually talk about Ellis Island and what that space looked like.
Yes.
But first, okay,
absolutely.
so you were working with Laura Michelle.
Yes.
And what context were you working with her?
I was an intern on Finding Neverland, both when it was at ART and then when it was on Broadway, and she was so kind to the interns, like famously kind to the interns, where she would invite us to her dressing room to have tea, and it was the sweetest thing. But when I was working on it, she said, you're a director, and if you ever need me to come do a reading for you or something, if that would be helpful to you, I'd be thrilled to. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would be so honored to have you in a reading that,
to say that to a group of interns is like remarkable.
She's a remarkable woman in that way. And I didn't know if she meant it, and then she meant it. Mm-hmm. And that was what was so astonishing to me, because I wrote to her a year later and I said, hey, I know you made this offer, and I don't know if you meant it, but I'm doing this crazy thing on Ellis Island. Would you want to come play Mother in Ragtime? And she wrote back in 20 minutes and said, absolutely. And it blew me away, because I thought I should just ask just to make sure, I thought there was no chance she would say yes.
Or that she'd be like, you can call my agent and we can arrange a business meeting the way I would for any gig.
None of that.
But
it was just
yes.
And she became the project's biggest champion. And what happened was, because she was the first person that we got on board, we were like, well, we can't have friends around a piano anymore because we have Laura Michelle Kelly, and we can't have her, she has to be playing opposite,
someone of equal stature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it snowballed in that way until we had this incredible all-star cast that I was like so honored to be working with, and that brought that piece to life in such an exciting way. So
throw out some of those names.
Brandon Victor Dixon, Shayna Taub, Aisha Jackson, Robert Petkoff, and then Brian Stokes Mitchell was our narrator.
Oh my gosh, I just
Andy
got
Mientes.
goosebumps.
Yeah,
I just got goosebumps thinking about Brian Stokes Mitchell. Was in the original company of Ragtime on Broadway, and at the end, he narrates it, and then at the end, he and Brandon Victor Dixon started singing together, and there was not a dry eye in the house. I thought the island might end up sinking into the Hudson River because of all of the tears that were coming out of everybody's eyeballs. I should say that when I first heard about this project, it might have been a year before you did it. Did it get announced really early?
We started talking about it because we were like, let's just talk about it and then it'll happen, which worked.
You know what? It's not the first time that's worked,
yeah.
And I don't think it'll be the last. You had an early Twitter account maybe, because I feel like I got followed on Twitter by @Ragtime on Ellis, and I was like, what is this? And then I thought, oh, well, this must be something that the National Park Service is doing to raise awareness about Ellis Island, and then names started getting attached to it, and what I remember learning was that it was by lottery and invite only. And I thought, I am going to die if I don't get to come to this thing. How many times can I enter the lottery, and by what means? And then I entered the lottery, and I kind of made peace with the fact that I probably wouldn't get to go. And then I got an invite, and it was join us at the ferry terminal on this evening to take a sunset cruise to Ellis Island. And I think one of the hardest decisions I had to make was who my plus one was going to be, because just this was the hottest ticket in town. And the idea that it was a reading by a college student, and also like the grandest theatrical production I'd ever seen. Those things existing in tandem just re-emphasizes how impressive and incredible it was, and you are, for making it happen.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you were there. And of course, when we were making those invite lists, we were like, who has to be there? Well, of course you have to be there. So, and we were so grateful for your support and the support of the community, because I think we didn't really know if the project would be embraced, but the community really like rallied around it and was so vocal about it. And so we were really so grateful for that.
So Ellis Island is not just an island. It is an important location in American history, especially when it comes to immigration. And the idea, like the actual location the musical took place was in, is it called the Great Hall? What is the...
It's called the Registry Room, but people call it the Great Hall.
It is a humongous, like it sort of looks like Grand Central Station. And in a way, that's what it was, right? It was a hub.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it is the room through which all immigrants were processed between 1892 and 1954, I think. And so there's so much history in that room. And if you look at the pictures of it historically, you can go stand in the exact spots where if your ancestors came through the island, you're standing on the same exact ground that they walked to come into this country. And so to be able to do it not only on the island, but in that room was very special. And I think we tried to, it was a concert, so it wasn't necessarily staged, but we tried to honor what the room stood for. Like, for example, we created a replica of one of the registry desks that they used in the room initially. And when we did A Shtetl is America, which is the number where in the musical they're coming to Ellis Island, we had folks checking in at that desk and tried to show what the island looked like then, and sort of resurrect those ghosts vis-a-vis the musical.
I feel like even as audience members, didn't we have to have our playbill stamped to get to our section?
Yes.
And like we were kind of sorted in a way, and it was... Anyway, this was a couple of years ago, but I obviously want to continue championing it because I feel like it's got to have a future.
I agree, and we're working on it. And I think that what's tricky there are two things that are tricky about it. One is as you were saying, the room looks like Grand Central, and so the ceilings are 60 feet tall.
I can imagine that presents an acoustical problem.
It does.
Is acoustical a word?
Sure.
A problem or challenge. We'll call it a challenge.
Sonic, yeah.
It wouldn't be the first time that you've faced a challenge like that head on.
But I think we learned that lesson on the concert because we had a $40,000 sound system, and yet amplification was messy because it's just such a tricky room. And so I've met with so many amazing sound designers who've helped us to understand the difficulties of making theater in that specific space. And what we ended up realizing is that there's not really a way to do it with amplified sound that honors the music properly. And instead, what we've sort of moved in the direction of is using headphones. So we had a workshop last spring where we worked with an amazing designer from LA who came in and designed a headphone system wherein the audience wore headphones and the actors were wearing body mics, and then we mixed the vocals live into those headphones so that you had like a personalized experience of the sonic nature of the show.
Do you know what that reminds me of, or like gives me an idea of? Is, when you go to a museum and you get those audio tours?
Yes.
What if you went on a walking tour of Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, but instead of it being like, on this spot in 1875, you get like Brian Stokes Mitchell singing?
Yes. That's precisely the idea. And when we tested it in this workshop last year, Peter Friedman, who obviously played Tata in the original, recorded audio tone narration for us that the audience would listen to on the ferry ride over to Ellis Island. So he would narrate your experience of, now you're passing the Statue of Liberty, now get off the boat, and sort of narrate you into the building. And then when you arrive in the building, the audio feed would switch over to the actors performing the musical. And so we feel like we've cracked that issue, which we're very excited about. And now the other issue that we need to crack is just financing,
Right.
because it's very expensive to rent Ellis Island, and we had an amazing producer who believed in and supported it for the concert, but it's a much bigger venture to run it for 3 months, which would be the goal of the full production. So we're getting closer, which is great, but we really need folks and institutions who are willing to support it as a nonprofit venture, because it just is not a money-making production, but
Right.
one that we believe should happen.
I mean, we might as well put the word out that you're looking for, like, where do people contact you if
Yes.
they have millions of dollars and would like to help make this production happen?
That would be amazing. My email is on my website,
Which is SammiCannold.com,
Yes.
SammiCannold. And I don't know if at Ragtime on Ellis is still active,
sure.
but
Yes.
but follow that account, because seriously, if this has a whisper of a future, you want to be a part of it. It was life-changing. And the fact that I can still remember so many details after, when was it 20?
It was August 2016.
Yeah. So almost 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and I still feel like I can smell it, and I mean that in a good way.
I'm so touched.
Just it was a multi-dimensional, multi-sensory experience. So you mentioned that this was one example of site-specific theater, which you fell in love with doing Violet on a bus. I saw Violet on Broadway, directed by Lee Silverman and
Yes.
starring Sutton Foster. And even though it does take place on a bus, I think the usual question in performing that show is, how do you put a bus on stage?
Right.
And you, in your incredibly unique and beautiful brain, went, how do we put a stage on a bus? Where, why, and how? Was it just what's the word when just spontaneous magic happens? Was it just that, or was there something that sparked it?
I think about it's the moment that sparked it so often, because it is certainly the moment that has set off the rest of my life from that moment. And so I get nervous, that thing where you get nervous that something that has happened in the past won't happen.
Of course,
but
it feels so. I'm having trouble finding my perfect vocabulary words today. I never want to say the word that's 99%
Yes,
there. I want to
sure.
get the word. But yeah, it feels so volatile.
So
oh
volatile.
my God, what if that moment
What if that
hadn't
didn't happen?
happened?
And I'm like, Sammy, it's fine. It happened.
It already happened, and yet it still feels like such a crux, such a what do you call the thing in the middle of a teepee?
Yes.
I mean, in the middle of a teeter-totter.
I know what you mean. It's like a...
Yep, here we
Anyway.
are, the non-vocabulary show. But like a crux, I guess.
Crux,
And
that's
if
good.
that
Yeah.
moment,
Tipping point.
if we talk about it too much, maybe it won't have happened in the past.
Yes, right, exactly. But that moment, I guess in this case, was I was a freshman in college, and I was listening to the soundtrack for Violet, which I'd always loved. I'd never...
Do you mean the original cast recording?
The original cast recording. The original cast recording, yeah.
It's a silly but also significant distinction. I think that theater nerds will be like, it's not a soundtrack. It's
Absolutely.
an original cast
The original cast
recording.
recording. So sorry. Yes. Indeed. Original cast recording from the 1997, I believe, production. And there was a grant at Stanford where I went to college that was called Redesigning Theater, that I think is unfortunately no longer now. But when I was there, it was a grant program started by Carol Shorenstein Hayes. And the prompt of the grant was to do something theatrical that was creative with space. I don't think they use the word site specific, but in other words, but that's sort of what they were alluding to. And I was trying to figure out what to apply for the grant with while I was listening to the soundtrack, and I was like, oh,
interesting.
And it all clicked.
Were you on a bus while you were listening to
No,
it?
I was in my dorm room. It was more boring, but and then I was like, oh.
In the movie version of your life,
Yes.
you're going to be like on the shuttle from
On
one
the
corner of
shuttle.
campus to another.
I
You're going to be
mean-
like going over to Hoover Tower
Yeah.
and like get it, you're going to be putting it on and what am I going to do with my life?
Right.
I'm just, I can't think about it anymore. I'm going to just listen to this gorgeous album and the light bulb will strike, like light up, pop up.
I love that version. That sounds great.
Well, look, you're an incredible theater maker. I could see your story becoming an incredible piece of theater too.
Whoa. I have not thought about that.
What would the site
What would the
of that
site
site?
be?
How do you put
Be my
a
dorm room.
bus? How do you put a theater on a bus on a stage?
Wow, that's trippy.
And an island.
And an island all at the same time.
Well, that's perhaps a question for the next generation
sure,
of
right.
major theater minds. So you did that at Stanford.
I did that at Stanford.
And then didn't you do it again?
Yeah, I did it at ART 2 years ago now. And it was really exciting because it was really the first thing it was the fall of my sophomore year of college, and I had directed with quotations around it previously, but not really like directed.
What's that mean? What's the difference?
When I was like 12 years old, this is the weirdest story. I was a camper at a like community arts program in my town, and for reasons that I still don't know, the head of we were doing a production of Joseph, and the head of the camp was like, I have to leave the room. Sammi, can you like take over? And I was 12 and the other campers were 12. And and then that happened one day, and then it just like kept happening. And to the point where like, I don't really have a strong recollection of it, but I found charts in my childhood bedroom that have like my staging of Joseph on them, staging with quotations around it.
Who was that guy?
His name is Keith Robillard. I'm very grateful to him. He was my like middle school theater teacher.
Are you still in touch?
Still in touch. I went back to teach at the school like this year.
You're like 13 years later.
It was very emotional.
He's lucky you didn't like ask for back pay.
I know. Well, he paid me. That was the thing.
Wait, at 12?
So I did it.
Child labor
I know.
laws.
So I mean, not that summer, but he ended up crediting me as the director that summer, which I was like, I don't even know what that means, but thank you. And then the following summer, he hired me to direct Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, and I was paid $1,000 for the summer, and I was like,
That's
my
like
mind
a
was
bazillion dollars.
blown.
It's like,
I was like, I didn't know what was happening. And then the following summer, he hired me again when I was 14, and then I directed quotes again, Annie.
I don't think you should use the quotation marks. You were getting paid to direct. You have freaking charts that it's, like it doesn't sound like that was a fake gig. I thought, so I read up a lot about you, like as much as I could find. And I thought you were going to be like, quote unquote, directing means when I was pretending shampoo bottles were actors and like staging out.
That's real.
So that's quote directing. When you're getting paid $1,000 to stage a production with real people
Sure.
of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, that other people actually come see, that is straight up directing with no quotation marks. And can you just tell people about the shampoo bottles? Because
Sure.
it's so adorable.
When I was a toddler, my favorite pastime was not playing with dolls or like coloring books or like any of that. It was putting on little shows with mini shampoo bottles that like my parents had in their bathroom,
Like from hotels
and like airplanes. And my parents would like told me that I would just be at the bathroom counter for hours and hours and hours, and they would come find me like moving these shampoo bottles around. So I think part of it is being born into a theatrical family. So I watched my mom and her friends do that every day. So of course it was what I wanted to do.
Your mom is the theater producer, Dory Berenstein.
She is.
And she's also a dear
star.
friend of mine. This may actually be the first time that I have had sort of my friendship with you and my friendship with her do not feel generational. And maybe it's because I'm like smack dab in the middle of I'm exactly the same age difference from you as I am from her. But also you both just feel like my peers.
That's so funny.
And you seem like each other's peers.
Oh, yeah.
And actually Dory said something recently where she said it used to be that Sammi was Dory's daughter, but now it's more like Dory is Sammy's mom.
I tried not to let that happen. She's funny about
I
it.
can't imagine that she's not like the proudest mom in the world.
She's very wonderful about it, and I think it's I'm hoping that there's a way that it's mutual, because I think we are each other's best friends, absolutely. Because how amazing is it to be able to call your mom and be like, Mom, like, I'm having this question about, like equity bylaws. And she's like, okay. But in addition to that, it's like when she can, like, she is very supportive of my work. And then, she has the prom on Broadway this season. And
Tony nominated for Best
Tony
Musical and
nominated.
multiple other awards as well.
Very, very happy for them. And I adore the show. And so it's been really exciting because this is the first time that she's had a nominated show where I feel like I've been able to sort of be on the campaign trail, quote unquote, with her. And
for your consideration, the prom.
The prom. Exactly. This is a plug that's not a plug, but a plug.
Let's plug it. I'm not about, I mean,
yeah,
look.
go see the prom. It's incredible.
Any Tony voters listening?
Yeah.
Sammi is advocating for the prom.
Yes, this is strongly, and so I think it's nice to be able to navigate that together in a way that is so rare. And it's funny, like I have a bunch of friends who have young children now that they're raising them, in the world of theater. And they're like, I'm so concerned, like their upbringings won't be normal. And I was like, no, let me tell you, like, it is the most amazing gift to be raised in this industry, because you have a built-in family of incredible people. You get to watch your parents like tell stories for a living. I mean, it's just, it was so magical, and I'm so grateful for it, and not surprised that it caused me to do the same.
It's also my favorite thing about theater, and I think the reason that I've been drawn to it my entire life, is that it is built on collaboration. And they say it takes a village to raise a child, and there are no better villages than those made up of theater people.
I so agree. It's just, and it's nice. I mean, because I feel like, you hear about it, like if your family's in the if your family's mechanics, like you're going to go into the family business. And I feel like that happens less in our industry, but it's so nice when it does. Like I have a few friends like Sienna Rafter, Janine Tesori's daughter, who like we've grown up together in the industry. So it's a cool thing, and I'm appreciative.
And yet, equally impressive, you wouldn't take your mom's money at first, right? Like she is an experienced theater producer.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier this hour, you're working on projects that need funding. And I know that especially early on, you were like, that's not how I'm going to make it in this world. Yes, there are connections there. And yes, I can call and ask you about equity rules, or I happen to know that you can rent out Ellis Island, and I'm sure there are plenty of other non-financial ways that being in that family helped. Of course, you can't deny that. But I don't know how many people who live, breathe, and dream of theater like you do would turn down financial backing from any source. And it's pretty impressive that you wanted to make it on your own.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't want to be that kid, and I think now we're working together now.
Well, you should, like I said, you're peers now.
Yeah.
You've each made your own way. I mean, you've proven yourself, and I don't think there's anybody that's like, oh, that's nepotism.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And she was so wonderful about it. She was like, let me help you. And I was like, just thank you. But wait 1 second, because I just don't want it to be Dory's daughter, you know? So now I'm taking the help.
So this most recent production, I think it was the most recent, was written by a playwright who said, this play is unproducible. Was that like catnip for you?
Oh, yeah. I read the play, which is called Endlings, and it's a play about Korean female freedivers who live on islands off the coast of mainland South Korea, and they dive up to 60 feet deep to harvest seafood for a living.
This play takes place in the middle of the ocean.
It does.
Did you ever for a second consider staging it in the middle of the ocean?
You know, there was a moment where we were going to go to Korea and shoot footage of divers in the ocean and then use that footage in the show. So that's sort of
close.
like doing it in the ocean, but
you did something even cooler. That still would have been a representation of the diving.
yes.
And instead you used...
We built a 40-foot wide tank on stage. I mean, we didn't build the tank, but we put it on stage. I certainly did not build the tank. Designed by the incredible Jason Sherwood, and the team at ART and all the designers created this underwater world that allowed us to tell the story both on land and underwater. And we had 3 heroic actors who dove into the water throughout the show, all of them in their 60s and 70s. And it was such a feat to watch them do the show, because they 8 times a week were just having these incredible performances on stage, and then they were deep in the water.
I unfortunately didn't get out to Cambridge to see it, but I have looked at as many pictures as I could find, and like it almost is like a giant fish tank. It reminds me, there was a club in San Francisco, a music club that I used to go to, that had a mermaid tank.
Yes.
And they actually had people like dressed up to look like mermaids that would swim around. And I feel like it was kind of like that. It was, except the story was about, like you said, it wasn't a story about creatures that are from the imagination, like mythical creatures. It was about real life people.
Yeah.
And also their story is so incredible because it's based on real culture and a tradition that's dying out, and it's dying with these women that are in their final years.
Yeah. UNESCO predicts that in 15 years there will be none of these women who are called Henyos left. And so the play is both a celebration of the culture and a depiction of the extinction of the culture. So it was, and Diane Borger, who's the executive producer at ART, and I went to Korea to do research for the show, and it was amazing to be able to understand that world firsthand and then bring it to life both on stage and underwater. So I was shocked that ART said yes, and that they agreed to put that on stage, and equal parts shocked that it materialized.
I think that every playwriting program and every playwright should take on the challenge of creating unproducible plays, because can you imagine that being the assignment for a semester, or like the subject of a class? Set a play.
That's such a good idea,
right? Because then I love talking to theater makers who put things in their scripts and they're like, good luck, director.
Yes.
And I even more love the directors who are drawn to that, because there are organizations, companies, and individuals who will throw something out because it's too hard.
Right.
And the real magic happens when people lean into that and go, it's impossible, and we're doing it anyway.
Yes, right. Yeah, I think that's what's so remarkable about Celine, who's the playwright, was that she was writing this play as her farewell to theater. Like, she thought she was going to quit theater because she was just like so fed up with all the trials and tribulations of it. And as a result, she was like, I'm just going to write whatever I want to write because nobody's ever going to read this play. Like, it's just for me to get out of my system. And I was like, wow, that to your point, that should be the prompt, like write this play as if it's never going to
write the play produced. Nobody will ever read. Oh.
Yeah. Right. Like that would be incredible. Cause I feel like then for ART to be like, oh, we like specialize in unproducible plays.
Right.
Was
I
just
mean,
like,
should we start a theater company
called
Unproducibles? The Unproducibles.
I love it.
It almost is like the Avengers, I mean, you would kind of have to be a group of superheroes who have strengths never before seen
right.
to make productions that are by definition
unproducible.
Yeah. Are we at one of those moments like you listening to Violet at Stanford? Like we're like, and that was the moment we were changed the world. I mean, I'm down.
I likewise. Let's do it.
So how did you find this script?
Kevin Lynn, who's an incredible agent at CAA, who I'm now working with, sent it to me. He and I had been friends for a long time because we were both interns at the ART when we were in college. And so we knew each other through that, but then he went on to be this, incredible high-powered agent, and he signed Celine. And then he said, you should read this play. And I think he knew
like that connective tissue for him to see you and to see Celine Song's work and to go, I know that this line between them needs to be drawn, makes my heart go pitter patter. Like, I have complicated feelings about the ideas of fate and time and religion and all this stuff. But when something like that happens and you're like, oh, no other two people in the world needed to be connected more than these two people, and somehow it happened, and in a way, how can you not believe in magic?
Yeah, I totally do. I say this to him all the time, and yet not often enough, that it's just like that he had the audacity to say, like, send it to this girl who's like 23, and you guys go do it at the ART, was such a brave move.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really admired that. And
was it Diane Paulus at the ART who said, yes, we will do this? I mean,
ultimately, but the first, Diane Borger, who's the executive producer there, and she and Diane Paulus work together, is like my second mother, and because I interned for her since I was 19, and Kevin and I both sent the play to her because we had both worked for her, and she read the play. And it's so funny. At the ART in the artistic office, there's a chart on the wall where they plan the season. It's very funny. It's like ART lore. They have like a chart and they write down all the things that they're considering putting in the season. And it's so funny because you can just walk into the office and you're like, oh, that's what the season is. But I walked into the office one day and I saw Endlings on the list, and I was like, hey, Diane, I see Endlings on the list.
And you hadn't been told?
I hadn't been told yet. And she's so funny. She like laughs at herself about this all the time. She goes, oh yeah, that's because we're doing it in the season and you're directing it. And I was like, sorry, what? It was just,
that is like the most anti-surprise party ever, and I kind of love it.
She like loves the drama of it, or like the lack of drama that is
exactly.
drama. We joke about it all the time.
So understated. It was like the biggest explosion ever.
I know. I was like, sorry, do you realize this is like the most important thing that's ever happened to me? And she was like, I do.
That's amazing. I'm actually headed out there this weekend.
Oh my gosh, to see Cairo?
Yeah. Yeah, there's
Incredible.
a new work that I actually know nothing about called We Live in Cairo, but the ART has been so welcoming to me, and through the marketing team and their publicity, I think they're actually taking a whole bunch of, as they call us, influencers, to like putting us on a bus, giving us a boxed breakfast and a lunch.
Wow.
And then we're coming back in the same day. We're going to a matinee, and then we're coming back.
How incredible.
Yeah, we did this for Jagged Little Pill too.
Oh, right.
And it was, I've actually, that one day that I went to see Jagged Little Pill is my only experience in the Boston area.
Huh.
And most of it was on a bus or in
Wow.
a theater. But
In and out.
man, was that a great exposure.
Wow.
And I can't wait to go back, and someday I'll be able to spend more time in and around Boston.
Wow. I'll be so curious to know what I'm going next week. I can't wait to see
Do you
it.
know anything about We Live in Cairo?
I know and love the Lazors and Taby and Madeline Smith and the design team on the show. I love the team, and I've listened to some of the songs online, and they're gorgeous. But that's all I know. So I'm going to opening next week, and I can't wait to see it.
I love that you have stayed such an really connected member of that family.
I love them.
You're passionate, and that's the thing that I'm most drawn to about anybody. And it's like I care less about what somebody loves than the fact that they love with their whole heart. Yeah. And you've said many times before that you don't have a backup plan, you don't have any other thing you want to do with your life. Like, you wake up thinking about theater, you go to sleep thinking about theater, and that's you.
Something.
Well, it's funny because one of the reasons that when I started this show, I called it Laura Heywood Interviews instead of the Broadway Girls Show, is that Broadway is not my only thing that I love like that. And the real thing I love, even more than I love Broadway, is sharing whatever the thing is. It's the broadcasting of it.
Right.
It's the enthusiasm. I was a sports talk radio host for a few years, and at that point, I was working on the radio station that was the flagship for the San Francisco Giants. They made a World Series. They got to Game 7 of the World Series that year, all the way back in 2002. And when I think about what you were doing in 2002, you were playing with those shampoo bottles. I was a sidekick on the morning show, but I also, just because of came along with my badge to get into the building, I had a press pass that got me into the ballpark. And I actually produced some pre and post game shows from there. And so I became a baseball fanatic, specifically that team. And I would fill an entire section with women in their 20s and 30s who wanted to come to the game and not worry about being the girl there,
Right.
We created this whole this club of women who were excited about sports. And
That's so cool.
And when I was in college, I created one of the first all a cappella radio shows in the country. And I was then, within a year, I was announcing concerts on the stage at the Seattle Opera House when rockapella would come to town. And my thing is contagious enthusiasm, and Broadway happened to be the thing I was obsessed with and most excited about when social media hit.
Right.
And Broadway Girl, the social media persona, was kind of an accident. It was just one more thing that I did to be obsessed with stuff the way that I did about in any medium, the way that whenever an obsession hit, but it got picked up, and it fed itself, and the proliferation of social media and my love of Broadway and my access to Broadway all fed each other. And so Broadway Girl became bigger than Laura Heywood in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I will tell you rooms that I walk
so
into
funny.
where everyone knows that that's Broadway Girl, and probably a third know my first name.
That's so funny.
Yeah, isn't it?
Do you like that, or it's frustrating?
Look, I wouldn't use the word frustrating. I would say that I've been thinking a lot about David Schwimmer. Do you know who he is?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
But a lot of people don't know his name. A lot of people call him Ross from Friends.
Right.
And he is that character, that role had to be the best thing that ever happened to him, right? He's made $1 bazillion, and he was on one of the most successful TV shows of all time. And he also is an incredible actor with a wide variety of skills. And he's also a fantastic director. I've seen him on stage. I've seen works that he's directed. I can only assume that he has a ton of training as like a serious actor. And I bet there are rooms he goes into and people go, oh, nah, Ross from Friends. For all I know, he has like an operatic singing voice. And
Right,
but
right.
There would be people probably who, if he went into audition for something or other, would be like, oh, now Ross from Friends thinks he can sing. Not, because he's so recognizable.
As that,
And
yeah.
so I am not at all mad at Broadway Girl. I freaking love Broadway
Fair.
Girl. I'm working on the Tony Awards this year, and
Oh my gosh,
I'm
congrats.
hosting this televised trivia contest, for Broadway, called Reward the Fan, and
Wow.
and I'm like, I love Broadway Girl. Broadway Girl is a brand.
Right.
It's not my identity, and so
That's
I've
healthy.
been talking a lot about the difference between brand and identity.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I totally just went off.
No,
but the ability to go off and to have creative control and to have this not just be a show about the brand,
Yes.
but something that is, you might say that this is a radio show that people would consider unproducible, because how would you get guests on if you didn't have it connected to a brand? How would you get anybody to find it or listen to it? And I made the decision against the advice of every consultant and every industry expert who said, you have to call it the Broadway Girl Show because that's where your audience is. And I said, I'd rather have something that feels like the real me and the whole me than something that is just an extension of a brand that reinforces the idea that I'm only one thing.
Right. That makes total sense. And then they can be cross-promotional.
I mean, I guess, yeah. And, if the
Why
brand...
not have two selves?
Well, I did for a long time.
Yeah.
Broadway Girl was anonymous for the first 5 years, and nobody knew it was me. And I thought she'd kind of fade out as people got to know me. But in a weird way, I've, in some ways, kind of faded out. I do want to stress that I do love Broadway and theater so much, and it is my heart and soul.
It shows.
But sometimes I think about if I had to never be on the radio or tweet or talk about my love for it, if I had to give all of that up, or if I had to give up sitting in the room watching it, I feel like
Woof, that's
my favorite thing about watching theater is sharing my love for it with other people. So,
That's
anyway.
beautiful. I mean, thank goodness. Then you're doing what you should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. More than a theater girl, I'm a broadcaster.
That's
first.
incredible.
And theater gets to be the thing I broadcast about right now.
That's amazing.
I know.
And you can't see it, but we're in this very beautiful studio.
Oh my gosh, DNR Studios is so great, and I'm really grateful for the fact that even though the vast majority of the people who listen to Laura Heywood interviews are listening on the free podcast version, people are starting to go to dnrstudios.com/Laura. That's a blatant plug, but and subscribing to the, I don't know what you call it, like the early version, the preview version. You can get every interview a week early. You can even listen live if you want, and there's like 10 other shows on the platform that people can listen to. And but a lot of people who are subscribing or becoming patrons through DNR aren't actually even listening to them early. They're still listening on the podcast, but
Wow.
they're making that monthly contribution as a way of supporting
support.
me so that I can keep making
Do
which
it,
is really
everyone.
lovely.
Do it.
Speaking of doing good with your dollars, and loving on something and things and places and people, you, in addition to this incredible work you did with Ragtime on Ellis Island, you are also involved with the Ellis Island Foundation, or the Statue of Liberty / Ellis Island Foundation. And I finish every show by talking about doing good in the world.
Oh.
Tell me about Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation and why you love it.
First of all, it's amazing that you do that. That's terrific.
Why have a platform at all if you're not using it to make the world a better place?
Right? That's brilliant. The Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation is one of the two charitable branches of the work that is done on Ellis Island, and it helps to preserve the landmarks, both of the Statue of Liberty and of Ellis Island. Both were hit rather hard, particularly Ellis Island, by Hurricane Sandy, and continue to need an immense amount of upkeep to preserve the landmark and all of the exhibits therein. And I think about it a lot because, to me, Ellis Island is such an important reminder of what our country stands for, and how I personally feel about immigration and how our country deals with that in the present moment, that I feel like keeping that landmark alive is critical. I so admire the work that foundation does, and was delighted to have the chance to talk about that.
The website for Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation is www.libertyellisfoundation.org. It's phonetic, libertyellisfoundation.org. But also, I think if you just Google Statue of Liberty Foundation or Ellis Island Foundation, you'll find it. You mentioned having a lot of personal feelings about immigration. I think a lot of us do these days. And I am always reminded of the plaque at the base of the Statue of Liberty that says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." I think it continues, "Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And the Statue of Liberty has that lamp in her hand to this day. There are huddled masses. There are so many, and there's so many people who need a safe place to go, and it is what America stands for. And like all those people that need refuge. That's what refugee means. Like that's what immigration. A lot of immigration is about refuge, and I'd love for our country to re-embrace itself as like
Very
a place of embrace and love.
And I'm surprised by the number of people I talk to who have never, New Yorkers who've never been to the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, going there supports the foundation, but so that is one way to do it when you buy your ferry ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like something that every New Yorker, everybody who's in New York should do, because it is such every time I go, I am reinvigorated to fight for what I believe in, particularly in terms of immigration, because it is such a living reminder of how our country became the country it is.
I like the idea you mentioned earlier that ragtime on Ellis Island will not be a money-making thing, but it could be a really important awareness-building project that could then become something that inspires people to put money into this foundation.
Absolutely.
And that's a perfect example of art changing the world.
Yeah.
Like in a really measurable sort of point A to point B kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think about this idea of an audio tour set to music. Yes. Or a musical redesigned to be an audio tour. And, while different than a live produced in-person musical, it could be the kind of thing that was a recording, put it on Spotify, and some people will listen to it as a concept album for ragtime, and other people will listen to it as they actually go around the place.
Yeah, there are so many new mediums available to us. It's so exciting. I'm doing some work in like the XR realm and VR and AR. I learned that the other week.
So virtual reality and augmented reality?
Artificial reality.
Artificial reality.
Yeah. And augmented reality, but it all falls under the banner of XR, which I'm very new to, but I'm learning quickly. So but it's like that realm and what Audible's doing in the space of theater. It's
and like
just
John Cameron
so
Mitchell has a
exciting.
new musical that's a podcast.
That's so cool.
Yeah, he was here the other day talking about it.
Oh my
and
gosh.
It has Glenn Close and Patti LuPone and Cynthia Erivo, and it's all of these songs that you can like hear. You can tell it's the same person who wrote Hedwig, but it also feels classic and futuristic and like oh my gosh, I almost like couldn't finish the interview because I was so excited to be in the room with him, because he basically like created a new art form with Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and then he's just created a new art form with his new project, which is called Homunculus. Anthem: Homunculus, and it's available on an app called Luminary. Anyway, theater. Like I said, at first, when I first introduced you, I was going to say, like, she's thinking outside the box. And then I was like, she doesn't even see a box. There aren't any boxes. In theater, we talk about a black box theater. We talk about a proscenium and a fourth wall and, like, all of these a term like fourth wall indicates being walled in. Maybe it's an invisible wall, but a black box theater is literally like, 6 flat black sides, and you're in there, and you, from the moment that you were creating theater on your bathroom counter with shampoo bottles in place of actors, you were not thinking in terms of that. And so much of this, especially the idea, like site-specific theater is an incredible idea. Creating new ways of thinking about theater is sort of a step ahead of that. And then using something like XR, thanks for the new vocabulary word, to represent something ancient feels like an even bigger exponential step into different new ways that we can create art.
Yeah, there's just so much accessible to us now. It's like it's really exciting. And I mean, I was very much a theater kid, but I feel like I'm learning so much about these other mediums and about TV and film and what's possible, that the possibilities are just endlessly exciting.
Well, I, for one, cannot wait to see what you make next. I mean, if you've done all of this in the first quarter century of your life, let's meet again in 25 years and talk about what you've created in the meantime. I sort of feel like you're at the point where even if you never created another thing, you've already contributed so much to the world of theater.
Would be so sad.
Well, it would be sad in a lot of ways,
yeah.
but like you've done so much, and I feel proud of you, and I feel excited to know you, and I feel invigorated about my own artistic pursuits after watching you go after yours. I want to encourage everybody to follow Sammi on Twitter, Sammi Cannold, at Sammi Cannold, Sammi Cannold, SAMMICNNOLD. And SammiCannold.com is the website. Go to libertyellisfoundation.org. I'm going to make a donation today in your honor.
Thank you.
And I'm going to
That's
encourage all
amazing.
of my listeners to do the same, because, listen, every drop in the bucket makes a difference. And if all of us threw a few dollars in that bucket today, we could really make a difference. I'm Laura Heywood. This has been Laura Heywood Interviews, and I just could not be happier to have had Sammi Cannold here today. Thank you.
3